Welcome, everyone, and thank you for attending the 2021 inaugural EGW Utility Solutions Conference. We know how valuable your time is, and we're grateful you've chosen to spend it with us today. Before I introduce Austin Rosenhagen to speak about advancements in smart meter technology, I want to just point out a few things. First of all, I want everybody to know that the session is being recorded, and we are going to make this available to view at a later date. Secondly, as you may not be aware, we are giving away a door prize for every session throughout the conference. For this class, Itron has graciously donated a Magellan cooler valued at $120. We'll choose the winner from the list of attendees to each session, so please make sure you've logged in with your real name and contact info if you want us to be able to reach you to give you your door prize. Unfortunately, Microsoft Teams doesn't allow us to unmute individual attendees, so all of your mics will be muted throughout the presentation. Don't worry, you can still interact with the presenters by asking questions via the Q&A function. If you look, you should see a button at the top of your Teams screen that looks like a question mark in a bubble. When you click that button and type in a question, it'll come straight to me. At the end of the presentation, we'll have a session where I'll read your questions to Austin so he can answer them. If we run out of time before getting to your answers, don't worry. We'll save your question and your contact info and contact you directly next week. Feel free to submit questions as they come to mind throughout the class, and don't worry, submitting questions won't interrupt Austin's presentation. So we encourage you to send as many as you want, as often as you like. Everything sound good? Great. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Austin Rosenhagen with Itron. Austin has been with Itron for 4 years as a technical sales engineer, and he holds a degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Kentucky. Thank you for joining us today, Austin. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'd like to thank EGW for having us today here to do this presentation. Today, as Daryl mentioned, we're going to go over advancements in smart metering technology, specifically with our new meter, the Intellis gas meter. Today on the call is myself and Todd Miller. Unfortunately, Todd's unable to talk at this time, but we are your Itron contacts. Our emails are listed on the screen up above. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. One thing I want to mention is some of you guys might be in EGW's territory, but they might not be your Itron distributor. If they are, Daryl Reed is your contact for the Intellis gas meter. If not, then you can get with us and we can get you with the appropriate Itron distributor. So starting with advancements of smart metering technology, we got to know where we've been before we know where we're going today. So in the early 1800s, before you saw these diaphragm meters you see today, there was a flat billing rate. It started off with the Baltimore Light Company, and they charged a flat rate no matter how much gas you used. Obviously, customers felt this was unfair. There was factories and other things that were using more gas than your standard customer. People with bigger houses were using more gas than people with smaller houses. And it was just in general unfair. That led to the invention of the gas meter. The first gas meter was produced in the mid 1800s. From there, that diaphragm meter had some small improvements on it, mainly just in materials, but the basic design of the diaphragm meter has existed the same since then. In the early 80s, we came out with our ERT modules. Our ERT modules changed the way that you read meters. No longer did you have a meter reader that had to go to each meter and read it physically. You were able to get that data by doing walk-by and drive-by. Now, our technology has changed over the years. We started with a big old computer in a van, and now it's something that sits next to you like a laptop in your van. We also changed the amount of data that you're able to get as we improved our technology. And from there, we're improving even more with our newest invention, which is the Intellis gas meter. Now, ultrasonic measuring technology has been around for many years, but advancements in technology have allowed us to make it more affordable and make it in a smaller meter and combine other things such as a safety shutoff valve and the ERT modules that we talked about before. Really, a meter is more than just a meter. It's more than just a cash register that you guys had in the past. It does so much more. And I want you guys to think about all these points as we go through our presentation today. I want you to think about consumer safety. I want you to think about workforce protection. I want you to think about distribution integrity, operational savings, customer satisfaction, and revenue assurance. Today, we're going to introduce and do a high-level overview of our new meter, the Intellis gas meter. And really, like I said before in the previous slide, it is more than just a meter. It is really 3 products in one. It is an ultrasonic measuring unit, it is a safety shutoff valve, and it is an RF communication module. Now, while these 3 products form one new product for us, they are each proven technologies. The ultrasonic measuring unit and the safety shutoff valve have been used over in Europe, where we have sold millions of units. We also have our RF communication module that we use in our ERTs today, and that we've been producing for over 30 years. These are each proven technologies. One of the advantages of ultrasonic metering technology is the ability to make the meter smaller and lighter. Here you see a picture of our I-250 gas meter in the background with our Intellis gas meter in the front ground. You can see a side-by-side comparison of each of these. Notice that our I-250 has an ERT module installed on it. The Intellis gas meter comes standard with an ERT module installed on it, and it is still much smaller and much lighter than the I-250 gas meter and just the standard 250 gas meter in general. At only 4.5 pounds and much smaller, its advantages are if you're trying to install a meter in a small space, it comes in handy. When you're carrying it from the truck, it's much lighter. When you're putting it in your truck or in your warehouse or in shipping, it takes up a lot less space, which results in a reducing cost. We also have the added benefit that it's much more aesthetically pleasing, not only because it looks better, but because it takes up less space on the customer's premise. While we made this meter smaller and lighter than our diaphragm meters before, we were still able to keep the standard 6-inch center-to-center hub size that you're used to with our 250 class meters. We also offer the same hub sizes that we offered before in our 250 class. This means you're able to install the Intellis gas meter on the existing meter sets that you have today with no modifications. It also shares the same underlab safety rating of Class 1 Div 1 that we have in our ERT modules today, which is the highest underlab safety rating available. One of the biggest benefits of this meter is the addition of the safety shutoff valve. We see you shutting off this safety valve in really 4 different ways. The 4 different ways we see you shutting this off is, for one, high flow. For this example, a utility sets a flow rate that they do not want the meter to go beyond. Let's call it 480 cubic feet per hour. If the meter were to exceed that 480 cubic feet per hour, the meter would shut off, preventing anything from happening bad downstream. Now, this is something that you guys would configure in the factory before the meters are delivered to you. However, it's something that's able to be changed on a customer by customer basis. We realize for you guys, each customer is different, and where you shut each customer off at is going to be different. So we want to make that to where you can configure it later. The second way we see is high temperature. There are 2 temperature sensors in this meter. One that's in the gas stream that is constantly measuring the gas temperature. The other one is in this case of the high temperature shutoff, and it's in the index, and it's in the case of a fire. Again, the utility sets a temperature that they do not want that temperature sensor to go beyond. If it exceeds it, the meter would shut off, and it prevents anything from happening for a moment. Now, we realize that this meter isn't going to last forever in the event of a fire, but we figured if we could give you any amount of time, it would be worth it. The third case we see is if a customer smells gas. Now, if you had a network set up, you would be able to shut the meter off remotely from the office without even having to roll a truck. If you don't have a network, that's okay. You're still able to shut the meter off from a safe distance away using one of our handhelds and an RF communication. So for this instance, your worker is not in harm's way. He's a safe distance on the street. He's shutting it off, and you don't have to worry about any sort of liability that comes with that. With that in mind, the fourth way we see is non-payment. We have been told that a number of utilities are met with guns and just in general angry customers when they go to shut off the gas. With this, again, they could shut it off from a safe distance at the street and avoid that angry customer. Now, when you go to install the gas or reopen the meter, you still are going to have to visit it and physically do that and push a button on the meter because we want you to run your standard safety checks that you normally do when you re-implement someone's gas. However, the customer that was angry before is probably going to be a lot happier when you're there to turn on their gas. Now, we recommend that this shutoff is only temporary, and it's not for long-term shutoffs such as move-outs or just in general long-term shutoffs for non-payment. And the reason for that is there is a small leakage with this valve of 0.035 cubic feet per hour, or about 14% of pilot flow. Just to give you an idea of what that is like, imagine a 10 by 10 by 10 room with no ventilation, no doors or windows, no air exchanges. It would take 52.5 days for that room to reach the lower explosive limit at this leak rate. Just to give you another idea of how much that is, if any of you are familiar with ANSI Z2180, it states that a regulator with a vent limiter can vent 2.5 cubic feet per hour into a house. That is significantly higher than the 0.035 cubic feet per hour. Also, in the United States, we don't have a standard on this yet, but over in Europe, this is standard. There are some additional benefits of this meter, one of them being that we have the data logging that we had in our ERTs before. The data logging in this meter is the same in our 500Gs today. You're able to get 40 days of hourly data if you're in network or if you're in mobile mode. If you're in network mode, you're able to get up to 160 days of hourly data. Now, not only can you do that, but you can configure it to where you get minute data. You won't get the same number of days, but you're able to get more granular data with the minute data. You choose the data that works best for you. We also have two indexes in this meter, a primary and secondary index. Your primary index is going to be whatever you buy. Let's say you're buying an NTC meter or a non-temperature compensated meter. That will be your primary index. That's going to be what you see on your LCD display. That's going to be what you get if you do a drive-by or walk-by read. Now, there is a secondary index, and in the case of buying an NTC meter, that would be a TC or temperature compensated index. This would be available if you have a network at any point in time in your collection manager, or if you don't, you're able to do a check endpoint in FDM and see this at any given point in time. So if you have an NTC reading and at any point you want to check the math and see what our conversion factor is and what the current reading is for that meter, you're capable of doing that. With this in mind, the Intellis gas meter has the same hardware always produced with it. It's always going to have the two temperature sensors, one in the gas stream, one in the index. It's always going to have the safety shutoff valve, and it's always going to have the same ultrasonic measuring unit. With that in mind, there is no extra cost for TC. We are seeing more and more customers switch from NTC to TC because of this. There are additional benefits behind the Intellis gas meter beyond just safety. There are also some theft detection. I don't know if you guys have ever seen something like this in the field, but not only does this cost you guys money because they're stealing gas, but it's dangerous for the customer and for the people around them. We have two alarms that are able to prevent this or help prevent it. We have air detection. In this case, if a customer were to remove the gas meter from the meter set, the meter is going to detect air in pipe. Once it detects that, it's going to flag an alarm. And if you guys do your drive-by reading, you're going to see that alarm and know that the customer disconnected that meter. The other alarm we have is a reverse flow alarm, or as I like to call it, the Ferris Bueller's Day Off alarm. For those of you that have seen the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off, they try to take a car, put it in reverse, and spin the odometer backwards. Obviously, it doesn't work for Cameron in that movie, and it's not going to work for the customer here either. If the customer were to take the meter, disconnect it from the meter set, flip it backwards in hopes to roll back the index, not only are they not going to roll back the index, we're going to record that consumption, and we're going to flag an alarm letting you guys know that they tried to do it. As I mentioned before, this meter is much lighter and much smaller than the diaphragm meters today. This results in improved customer satisfaction as a result of just aesthetics. It also reduces the footprint in your warehouse and in shipping. Now, one issue I didn't know existed, but we have heard of, is there's an issue with people dropping these meters on their feet. Now, a 4.5 pound meter hurts a lot less dropping on your foot than a 9 or 11 pound meter would. This isn't as big of a difference, 4.5 to 9 or 11. But as we start to get into our commercial and industrial meters, there's going to be a more significant difference in both size and weight. And you will see that to come in our roadmap. As I mentioned before, you have two indexes on this meter. The primary index you're going to see on your LCD and through your reads, and the secondary index you're going to get in FDM. I also mentioned that there's two temperature sensors in this meter. The one on the index is for your shutoff, and the one in the gas flow or in the stream is to record the current gas flowing temperature. Now, we use this for our temperature compensation calculation, but you guys are also able to see it on menu number 5 through FDM on doing a check-in point, or if you have a network at any point in time. Another advantage of the ultrasonic metering technology is that there is no moving parts in it, which in result turns more accurate meter and less noise. We all know that in a diaphragm meter, there's moving parts, and it has a tendency to, over time, slow down a little bit. We do not have that issue with this meter. If you look at a life test for one of these meters, it holds about the same value for the whole life of the meter, which ANSI defines as 1 million cubic feet or 4,000 times the rated capacity. Now, I mentioned earlier that a meter is no longer just a meter, and I want you to keep those 6 things in mind. With the addition of our safety shutoff valve, we give you distribution integrity, we increase your customer safety, we increase your workforce protection. With an ERT module already being installed on it, you reduce the number of truck rolls for reading and the number of people that you have to have out for reading, which results in operational savings, as well as you're able to shut this off remotely and not have to have someone physically go there and shut it off, which results in operational savings. The increase in aesthetics and the increased safety of this meter results in customer satisfaction. Our 2 alarms in this, our air detection and our reverse flow, give you revenue assurance. They let you account for any stolen gas. As I said before, a meter is doing so much more than just reading these days. It is doing all these things. Now, for those of you that have our mobile system or are interested in it, let's talk about how this meter would work in your system today or your potential system in the future. This meter works just like our 100Gs do today. And if any of you are using 100Gs today, this meter works just like it in mobile mode. It has the same output ranges that we have. You can do your mobile handheld, which is for your standard reading. There's a mobile high power mode, which is if you have it in an area that's a little bit hard to read. It puts it out at a higher output, but not as quick. And then we have our hard to read mode, which puts it at a higher output and quicker. I will say this hard to read mode will result in a battery loss, and you take that 20-year battery life down to 15 years if you choose to do this. But if it's important for you to get the read, then it's worth it. Another important factor about this meter that's different from our 100Gs today is it has the ability to grow with you as you grow. What I mean by that is if you guys choose to move to a network in the future, this meter can move with you. And not only can it do that, but it is easy to switch to network mode. It can do it via drive-by or walk-by when you guys are reading your meters in the field. So let's say that you decide to move to network and you want to slowly build up the infrastructure of your network while still reading the meters mobily, still taking advantage of your system that you have today, and still getting the benefits of the shutoff valve that we added to this and all the other technologies. You guys can do that once the infrastructure is in place. You can roll a truck, get the readings for your meters for the month, and convert the meters to network mode. This eliminates having to visit each meter in order to switch it to network mode. Another additional benefit with the drive-by in this meter is the ability to shut off customers. So we mentioned shutting off customers for non-payment earlier. If you have a list of customers that aren't paying and you want to shut off, you can go into FCS, do an advanced AMR request, select those customers, and shut off those customers as you go by and do your drive-by reads. Now, if you guys were to have a network, we have a number of alarms on here, and you guys can get all of those through a network. But if you don't have a network, there are still a number of alarms and tampers that you're able to get. Some of the most important ones, and one that you guys will probably recognize if you know our ERTs today, is magnetic tamper. What this is if a customer tries to alter the reading of a meter using a magnet, this will trigger it and let you know that the customer tried to do that. Much like our ERTs today, much like our electric meters as well. We also have a battery counter on here. This will let you know when the battery is getting down to 10%. At a 20-year battery life, that gives you 2 years to replace the meter. We added a communication module detach alarm. This replaced our tilt tamper and our ERTs. And what it is if a customer gets smart and knows that you guys are reading these meters via radio communication, and they know that there's a module on the front of it, and they think, you know what, I'll just disconnect that module and keep you guys from reading it. Not only is that not going to work for them, obviously it's not going to read anymore, but you guys are going to be made aware of what is going on there, and there's going to be an alarm with it. And it's going to be also time stamped to let you know when it happened. I mentioned the air and pipe and the high temperature and high flow alarms earlier. Those are all available to be able to be pulled back in your mobile routes. Let's talk about a scenario of how the valve would work. So this is a scenario that happened in Muncie, Indiana back in 2015. There was a home for sale and it was left empty. Someone had visited that house and knew that it was left empty, so they went in and decided to seal the furnace. Obviously, the person stealing the furnace didn't think about shutting the gas off properly, so they just ripped it out and let the gas flow into the house. At the moment around 2 o'clock when they stole it, the gas went up to about 200 cubic feet per hour. It then exceeded almost 3 times the rated capacity of the meter until about 9 o'clock when there was an explosion. Now, in this scenario, luckily no one was in the house and no one was injured. But if there was an Intellis gas meter on this house, it would have been prevented. It would have shut off after 120 cubic feet or just 15 minutes. We also have a new function in our Intellis gas meter that you guys have an option to enable to where it could shut off after 15 seconds at 500 cubic feet per hour. Again, that's something that you guys choose whether you want to enable, or you can configure your own. In this case, with 120 at 15 minutes, it would be 480 cubic feet per hour that we set that limit to. For each customer, it's going to be different, but either way, it's going to shut it off before anything bad happens. With this being a smart meter, there are a number of LCD menus and alarms that are available on this meter. One of the main ones is the main screen that you guys will be used to seeing. You have volume in there that you're used to seeing on your meters today. You might not be used to seeing it digitally, but it's there. We also have the units here in the right corner that you guys are used to seeing. We also indicate whether it is TC or NTC. Now, most of you that buy our meters today or buy any meters are used to having that indicated on the badge. It will still be on the badge, but it will also be located here. There are a number of different menus that are available in this as well. And to help you know what menu you're on, in the left corner, we will always display the current menu number. Now, you will notice that there is a battery icon on here as well. I mentioned that there's a low battery status that will be alerted. Also, as the meter drains in battery, this battery icon will go down with it. We also included the valve icon here. As you can see, the valve is open in this state, and there is an arrow going through it. If the valve were closed, there would be an X through the valve. As I mentioned, there are a number of different LCD menus on this meter. One of them being the primary index, and that's what you guys saw on that last screen. That's where you're going to see your temperature, non-temperature compensated value. But I also mentioned the reverse flow earlier. In that event of that reverse flow, where the customer is going to be triggering how much consumption they flew or that they did in reverse, the volume under alarm is going to show up on screen number 2. I also mentioned that if you have a network, you're able to get all of these alarms through your network. And there's a number of alarms that you guys are going to pull back through your reads in FCS, Itron Mobile, or Temetra. The active alarms are also on menu number 3. So if you guys are in the field, you'll see any alarms that you wouldn't see through drive-by. Another important thing that I mentioned was the gas temperature. If you're interested in seeing what the current gas temperature is on a customer site, you can see that on menu number 5 on the LCD menu. We also have the conversion factor associated with it. Other than that, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but there's a number of different menus that tell you what the pressure compensation is, what the firmware version is, and what your local dated time is, and just general information about the meter. If anybody has any questions, we can go into more detail on this later. As I mentioned, with this being a smart meter, there are a number of alarms. We already went through the reverse flow, the extended high flow, the high temperature, and the air and pipe. Now, those alarms tell you something about safety. They tell you that there's an error going on with the meter, the customer's doing something. We also have a number of diagnostic alarms and alerts in here that let you know when something is going wrong with the meter. Those include a time sync, which is mainly for network. It lets you know if your time on your meter is outside your network. There's also a number of flow measurement out of range, gas temperature out of range, flow measurement hard failure, flow sensor measurement error, and transducer error. Those all tell you if there's anything affecting the actual reading on the meter, and if the meter could be potentially not accurate. Now, in your diaphragm meters today, you have none of these alarms, and you would just wait for a customer to notify you or wait till you notice something on billing that it's either low or high. Earlier, I mentioned that with the ultrasonic metering technology, you have the benefit of making this meter lighter and smaller. Now, this isn't as big of a benefit with our 250 class because you don't have as big of a difference between the weights and the sizes, but it still matters. In the future, though, we are going to get into our commercial and industrial meters as well and make these Intellis gas meters. And with that in mind, the next meter on our roadmap is the Intellis 425 gas meter. With this Intellis 425, we're adding a pressure sensor, and you are going to be able to shut off the meter based off of pressure, both low and high. In addition to that, on our first release, we're going to have center to center sizes of either 8 1/4 or 6 inches. This means that you can put this meter on an existing 425 class meter set or a 250 class meter set. And the meter will be able to accurately measure from a 250 class all the way up to a 425 class meter. In addition to this, we are also adding configurable displays. Currently, our displays aren't that configurable, and what you get in the consumption is what you get. But as we go on to these meters and future firmware releases, we will be enabling more configurable displays for the end customer. With that in mind, this meter will be released projected Q3 of 2022. That is all I have for you guys today, and now it's time for the Q&A portion.
Thank you, Austin. Great job. We do have a
Thanks,
few
sir.
questions.
Okay.
Everyone, you'll have time left to answer or to ask more questions, so keep them coming if you have them. Austin, the first question was sent in. It said, is this meter compatible with my existing Itron system, which is about 10 years old?
Now, that's a good question. So if you have an existing Itron mobile reading system, well, I'm assuming with it being 10 years that you're an MVRS if you're drive-by. Also, if you're reading on a network, you're at the best a Choice Connect system. You will have to get at least FCS to be able to read it in a drive-by system. It does not currently work with MVRS today. We do not currently have the ability to read a Choice Connect because we are lacking a NIM message that we have in our 100Gs today. It will be available in a future firmware release, but not currently.
Thank you, sir. I have another one for you. It says, how many units are currently installed in the US and what about elsewhere?
That is a good question. I do not have that off the top of my head. But Daryl, if you want to get that customer's name, we can have, one-on-one conversation. I can get those numbers and maybe even get some examples of customers that are using it near them. And we can have a conversation at a later date. One thing I will say with you guys being in the Texas area, Centerpoint is installing a bunch of these. I just don't know how many.
Okay. We had another question come through. The person wanted to know if there was an expected time frame for the rollout of the 425.
Yeah, so the 425 will be available in Riva and in mobile mode in Q3 of 2022. We don't have an exact date right now, but all I can tell you is Q3 of 2022.
Okay, great. We did have one person comment that Ferris Bueller's house is just a few miles from where they're located in Long Beach. So
That's awesome.
Interesting. Another question came in. What material are the threaded connections made from?
They are the same material that are currently in our diaphragm meters today. Unfortunately, I don't know that off the top of my head. I'd have to get that for you, but same as our I-250, our Metris, or any of our industrial and commercial meters that we have today.
Okay, great. Anyone else have any questions? That's all that we've received so far. So we have some time left if you wanted to ask anything else. I'll give it just another couple seconds. All right, last chance for questions before we close out this session. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and read these notes to finish out. If you have any questions, you can still submit them and I'll see them right before we close. But otherwise, if there are no questions left, we'll go ahead and close this. Remember, if we didn't get your question answered, we can save it along with your name and reply back ASAP. So if you didn't submit a question with your name and you still need an answer, just send me your contact info and I'll get back with you. You can also email us at events@egwusa.com and we'll be sure to reply as soon as possible. Of course, you can also reach out directly to me or your EGW territory manager or call our office. All that contact info is on the screen now. And we'll leave this slide up for about 5 minutes after we end so that you have plenty of time to write down the info. Don't forget, being here has automatically entered you in a door prize drawing for a free cooler. We'll contact the winner soon. Austin, any other comments before we close out?
Yeah, I would just like to thank EGW for having us today and giving us the chance to present this. I'd like to also thank all of you guys that attended today. I appreciate your time. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or Todd. If you didn't get our emails in the beginning, go ahead and get with Daryl and he'll be able to get you in contact with us. I would like to mention that I would like for EGW to be your guys' first contact or your Itron distributor. Thank you guys.
All right, thank you, everybody. With that, this session is concluded. We hope to see everyone in the next session, and we hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks again for coming.
Thank you.